Hello, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Well, what a game in Rome. Italy 24, France 29, the full-time score. We almost had the upset. We almost had one of the biggest upsets in the history of the Six Nations. In the end, it wasn't to be for the Italians, who gave a brilliant account of themselves. I think it's really encouraging, particularly when you consider their results from the end of the last Six Nations through the autumn and to now as well. So in this video, I've just been reporting on the game on radio over here in the UK. So I'm just going to be reflecting on it, my immediate reaction, if you like. Made a few little bullet points on what was, as I say, a brilliant test match. If you are new here, do subscribe to the channel, like the video, and drop a comment down below. What do you make of both of these sides now? Having seen this 80 minutes of rugby, does it change your view on perhaps what France could do this Six Nations? Does it change your view on where Italy are as well? All right, let's get into it. So I was saying before this game that it would be one of the biggest upsets in the history of the Six Nations, possibly the biggest upset if Italy were able to beat France, who came into it heavy favourites. And it almost happened. What do we have? Maybe 15 minutes still to go. Italy kicked the penalty from Allen, which gave them the lead, 24-22, and then France were able to finally get the winning score. Jalibert off the bench to cross for them, getting some territory in possession and being able to capitalise on that. But even at the end, again, Italy were given the opportunities through French ill-discipline to kick down into the 22 and give themselves a chance to win that game as well. And I think they'll be pretty disappointed with that final maul and how it played out. But as I've said already, it was a brilliant test match. And think overall, this opening weekend in the Six Nations, it's the championship that continues to deliver. I know that Ireland winning Cardiff was fairly one-sided, but outside of that game, we have been served up two crackers in terms of the Calcutta Cup at Twickenham, and then also France's victory over the Italians in Rome. I'm going to start with the French because I think they're a really interesting case. And on the surface, we can look at it and we can say this is a French team that went through 2022 unbeaten. They were the Grand Slam Six Nations champions last year. They have a team packed full of really quality players, and they've been able to get the job done here in a game where perhaps things weren't going their way. They obviously weren't at their best, and they've still found a way to win, which has often been the case for this French side. I did commentary on their game against Australia in the autumn at the Stade de France, another game where they didn't play particularly well, but they got the victory. And I feel like we're saying this a lot for France. So on the one hand, this is a sign of how good France are, that they don't have to be at their best. In fact, they're often not at their best, but they are still winning. The flip side of that coin, if we want to entertain the argument, is that they are perhaps riding their luck a little bit. They've had a lot of results that could go one way or the other, and eventually you're going to come up against an opposition where that result does go their way. I think we're probably going to see it against Ireland in Dublin next weekend. That's going to be a cracker of a test match. Probably the two best teams. Certainly, I mean, Ireland definitely one of the two best teams. France the second best team, I would say, in the championship. So that game in Dublin is going to be huge. But after what we've seen here against Italy, I would have some concerns if I was a French fan. I think Ireland, as things stand at the moment, I would say could have the edge in that game. And there were uncharacteristic errors in this match that we've all just watched. 9 penalties given away in the first half, and that was why Italy were able to go in at half-time trailing, 14-19 I think at half-time. They were trailing, but they were still within touching distance. And with the greatest respect to Italy, who particularly in the second half I thought played some really good stuff, that was more down to French ill-discipline. When France got opportunities in the 22, they scored and they looked quite dangerous, but they also allowed Italy to come back into the game by conceding a number of penalties. So I think that's an area, a very obvious area, that they will look to correct. I'd also be really intrigued to see what the reaction is in France and in their interviews in terms of the penalty count where they were on the wrong side of it. Now, undoubtedly, they were a lot more ill-disciplined than they often are. And I didn't have any ref feed or TMO feed or anything like that, so I was kind of watching it without any audio, essentially. So I don't know exactly what the conversations might be there. I felt like there were a few times where the Italians were perhaps a little on the better side of some of those decisions. Some things went their way, I think, where they didn't get penalised and France did. I know that happens in every test match, but again, I think just in the context of this game, it's an important thing to note. Because it did lead to the game we ultimately saw, with Italy being given field position. And credit to the Italians, they were able to take those opportunities and capitalise on, particularly when there was numerous French penalties which stacked up, particularly towards the end of the first half. I think France gave away like 2 or 3 penalties in quick succession. Italy kicked their way downfield and ultimately got another score towards the end of the half. They also turned the ball over a lot, France, which isn't something we're used to seeing them do as well. So if you think of this French side in the last 2 or 3 years and how they've been so good under Fabien Galtier, their discipline's been good, their defence has been good, and they haven't conceded too many turnovers. And I think a couple of those things today were just a little bit off. So I'll be interested to know, actually, from French fans, is this just one of those games that sometimes you come up against Italy and it's a tighter game than you would want to see, or are there bigger issues at work here? Do drop a comment down below and let me know. I'll be really interested to hear your thoughts on that one. But my final thing in terms of the French is, could this be a good thing for them? I mentioned already that they had a couple of results in the autumn where they didn't look quite as impressive. They were still good, don't get me wrong. They won the games, but they weren't quite as impressive. And I just wonder, having gone unbeaten last year, with a World Cup on home soil later this year, whether it's potentially a good thing that France have a little stumble, if they have a little blip, whether it could just kind of resharpen, refocus the minds ahead of that World Cup and maybe even into the latter of this Six Nations, or do you just think if you're winning it doesn't matter, you're getting the job done? I kind of fall on the side of, I think eventually if they keep having these games where it's tight and they just about win but they're not great, eventually one of those results aren't going to go your way, and you don't want that to be a World Cup quarter-final or semi-final. You need to be hitting your stride for those games. So I don't know, as I say, let me know in the comments. Let's get on to the Italians though, because for years, literally years, we all wanted Italy to be the side that every so often they promised they could be, and they'd get a good result here and there and wouldn't back it up. And I just wonder now, a combination of factors, are we slowly getting to the point, and it is slowly because it takes time to build up a team, particularly at international level, but are we getting to the point where Italy are going to be able to have these sorts of results? I know they've lost, but in terms of really competitive games on a more regular basis. If you look at the victory against Wales at the end of last Six Nations, you look at the victory against Australia in the autumn, the performance here against France, who are a very, very good side, and also the steadily improving performances of their under-20 sides, which for any of you that pay attention to the under-20 Six Nations or that kind of level of fixtures, Italy have steadily been improving on a consistent basis there as well. So perhaps they're going to have more of a talent pool coming through, which is going to be crucial in terms of the senior game at the men's international level as well. I just hope we are getting to that point. But credit to Italy today, because actually, and again, I feel like I'm opening myself up to have people have a pop at me here because I'd be overly negative about them. I was so frustrated in the opening 20 minutes of this game about Italy. This is what I just jotted down in terms of my notes. I said sloppy mistakes early. They had a scrum where it was wheeling, they were under pressure, and the Italian number 8 just kind of gets caught with it, was too slow, turned the ball over. When Italy had the ball at the back, they just needed to use it and get rid of it. Really simple thing, but a big mistake at that level when you turn the ball over. There was also a knock-on in the midfield when they were just going through the phases. I think one of the French tries actually came when Italy cleared out at their own ruck and it just left the ball there for France to dive on it and turn over possession deep into their own red zone. Things like that, I was getting so frustrated because they're quite basic errors. It's not about not having the personnel or not having the game plan. They clearly had those things, but it was some of those basic errors. And I wonder whether Italy were they just didn't come out the traps as quick as they wanted to. But despite those things happening, in fact, another example of it, again, what I wrote down here, they conceded a try immediately after they knocked over a penalty, and that actually ended up being the Olivon try where he knocked it on over the line, so it didn't count in the end. But even so, it was kind of compounding errors essentially after they got themselves a foothold in the game, a penalty, and then they almost conceded a try. And they also had this tactic of playing out from their own 22, which I think worked better later in the game, but perhaps earlier on was playing them into trouble. But despite those things, despite my frustrations, Italy were brilliant. I thought they got better as the game wore on. I think their attack, importantly actually, has really kicked on. And they were able to get quicker ball. They started going through the phases. They had more shape in their attack. I remember watching Six Nations games over the years where Italy would have the ball, and at no point did they look like they were going to break a defence down. So I think maybe that's changed. I mean, I know Ange Capozzo is a really exciting player, the breakthrough player of the year in men's rugby at the World Rugby Awards at the end of last season. So maybe they just have more elements there But I still think missed opportunity for Italy as well with that driving maul at the end. But I'm really encouraged from what I've seen from them. And now all of a sudden, let's look at next week for Italy. Going away to Twickenham, never beaten England. England obviously in a rebuilding phase under Steve Borthwick. Things by no means perfect there. That's going to be a much tougher game for England than many people would have predicted. So look, the Six Nations is set up brilliantly. France, yes, I know, despite me being critical, they're still a wonderful side. I just have some question marks there. As for Italy, I want them to kick on. I want to see at least one victory this Six Nations. I don't want 5 plucky defeats. I want to see something. This was a missed opportunity today, but they were up against a brilliant team and they were fabulous. It was a great game. Loved watching it. Let's do it all again next weekend. As always, do subscribe to the channel, like the video, and most importantly, drop a comment down below. This has kind of been me just pressing record at the end of the game, basing off a couple of my notes, my immediate thoughts. So if I've missed anything, I'm sure you'll let me know below. All right, I'll see you in the next one.